about to get real, keep it live, that's right. From Pennsylvania to across the globe, it's time for this Steelers All-Star Show.
Welcome to the Steelers by the Lake podcast. My name is James Strong, joined once again by my co-hosts Cody Tanner and Nick Pretzel. Nick, how are you doing on this chilly Saturday morning?
James, we're back to cold, but I'm hoping that this Steelers offense is going to be hot this coming year. We got a new offensive coordinator and some other coaches to be talking about, so I'm excited. Cody, how you doing on this fine, freezing morning?
Probably not as cold as you guys are, but it is still freezing here, dealing with snow. I thought I got away from it, but it just continues to follow me, which is lovely. But excited to talk Steelers football, especially these coaches. James, how are you?
I'm doing all right, man. Fighting off a little bit of a cold this morning here over the last couple of days, but that's just what happens when you work outside all winter long. So we're going to power through. We got lots of fun things to talk about today regarding the Steelers. A lot of new assistant coaches have been named, and there's some stuff going on outside of that as well to talk about briefly. So we'll kick right into it here. The first topic of the day is something you don't necessarily want to talk about, but it's something that needs to get put out there and out of the way. DK Metcalf and many others, the Steelers organization, Chad Oak, Joe Cinco and his podcast and that company, the Detroit Lions organization and football field. Everybody,
the list goes on and on.
Yeah, he just put everybody he possibly could in there. The fan that had the altercation with DK Metcalf has decided to sue them all, as we assumed he would. And I would advise us to not say anything slanderous about this individual, as to not be added to the list, although I can't imagine we would be. But if you want to know anything about this individual, just look up his history from previous altercations with DK Metcalf, where what came out of his mouth is well documented and factual and not something you would say to your own mother.
Nope. And it was fact-checked in the sense of people around him in the stands, putting the pieces together for certain people. And DK had reported this guy in the past. And we've already been over this when it happened, but it's sad that somebody's just looking for a quick payday, and that's all it is. So, unfortunately, who knows? Maybe this guy opens up a can of worms for himself. I'm not sure, but we'll see how this all plays out.
He absolutely did. I don't know his employment situation, but if they didn't want to get rid of him before, they're going to want to now, especially with everything being out there. I mean, the videotape from the field that day originally didn't look good, and then you saw every other angle, and you could tell no contact was made other than with the wig that he was wearing. And I don't know how pulling on a wig that someone's wearing is worth $100 million. But I don't think any rational person thinks that's a good decision. Also, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "That was the goal," after the altercation, which shows clear intent, which is a real bad sign for him legally, and I'm surprised that anyone was willing to even take his case on. But the comments that came out of his mouth from his first interaction with DK were so foul that DK was trying to get him to not be allowed at future games. So that kind of tells you what you need to know about this individual. His plan was to sue DK and everyone else that he could all along, and now he's going through with it. But I don't think that's going to go so well for him. And I imagine that a lot of people in the future are not going to want to do much with him as well.
Nope. He's going to just he's writing his own story. We're just watching it unfold at this point. Whether he realized the pen is working the way he wants it to or not. So, I mean, we'll update you guys while that continues to happen, but I don't think there's much more to say other than, he filed for lawsuit. He made a big stink about it on social media and posting it. And he's probably, asking for $100 million. He's probably going to accept 5 if he gets anything, which I don't think he will.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah, if I were DK Metcalf and the other people who are going to have expenses in this situation, I'd countersue him for my expenses because it's a very ridiculous lawsuit.
Yep. Let's talk about a previous Pittsburgh Steelers coach. We're going to talk about new coaches here in a little bit, but let's talk about a previous one.
Absolutely. The one of the fan favorites from last year, outside of course, Danny Smith. We all love Danny Smith. Eddie Faulkner, the running backs coach, has found a new home. And it's not ideal for Pittsburgh. He is now going to be the running backs coach for the Baltimore Ravens, who really didn't need any help in that running game, but now they've got an excellent running backs coach helping guide them there. What do you guys feel about that?
Betrayed, sad. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be turnover when you get a change in head coach, and when you're getting that change in head coach, usually the schemes change and things are looking very, very different. And you wanted a guy like that to be one of the few pieces that stuck around. You definitely didn't want Eddie Faulkner going to the Ravens, or as we so lovingly like to call them on this show, the Ratbirds. So it's a tough thing to see, especially when he's now got the likes of Derrick Henry, and I believe Justice Hill is still on that roster, and so roster. I don't know why I said roster. But you got a lot of quality pieces in that running back room that didn't need the help of having a better offensive mind than John Harbaugh, who decides not to use Derrick Henry in the fourth quarter of a game and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a very different AFC North this year, and I'm not going to like having to see Eddie Faulkner across the field from us 2 times a year.
Yeah, I think for me, the big pain that comes from this is the fact that Jalen Warden, like you said before, James, in the previous episode, hasn't posted to social media much, and he went out of his way to post and say, "Hey, keep my coach here." And unfortunately, Pittsburgh wasn't able to do that. And obviously, we saw the success from both Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren this past year. And I'm not saying we're not going to see the success now, but it's kind of tough because it feels like at this point, there's not, other than the players, there's not much more left from that old coaching staff at all. The 2 guys we kind of thought would stay, which was obviously everyone was hoping Danny Smith, and then obviously now Faulkner, they're gone. They're gone. They're moved on, and Pittsburgh's moving on without them. So this is in all the ways that certain people wanted, it's a fresh start. In all the ways that some people didn't want, it's still a fresh start. So we're going to see how this goes.
Absolutely. I think we've got 2 coaches staying. Tom Arth, the quarterbacks coach, I believe they kept him, who he had some ties with Mike McCarthy, of course. And then the middle linebacker coach also, who also was a McCarthy guy. And last year was the first year he wasn't under McCarthy. So both make lots of sense to be retained. The most frustrating part about losing Eddie Faulkner to me, I get it. It's just part of the process. When you lose your head coach, you expect a huge turnover. None of us wanted to see Eddie Faulkner go, as Cody mentioned, as we mentioned on previous shows as well. Obviously, the players had a very high opinion of him, and not everyone loves their position coach. My big thing with Eddie Faulkner is that a couple of years ago, when Matt Canada was fired before the season was over, Eddie Faulkner called the plays for the final 3 games of that season, and that went well. That went very well. That was Mason Rudolph playing his best football. Eddie Faulkner was calling the plays for those. So there is some potential there for him as a future offensive coordinator, in my opinion. He got a slight taste of it now. He wasn't the one doing the game plan during the week. There was another assistant coach that was working on the game plan. Eddie was just calling the plays. But he did a great job in doing so in that short time limited role there. So I hope to see Eddie have success in the future. Hopefully it's a one and done in Baltimore and he gets an OC job somewhere else, and it's easier to cheer for him, maybe in the NFC somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Go to Philly. Go to the other Pennsylvania team so I can have some reason,
Or the Pittsburgh West. He can go to the Cardinals. He can follow the path that Ken Wisenhunt did.
There we go.
And so many others.
According to Gary Dulac, we have 3 coaches retained. It's Tom Arth, Gerald Alexander, and Scott
Alexander's
McSorley.
Gone.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah, Alexander just signed with somebody else this week. So
okay, so he must have gotten hired after Dulac.
He was expected.
Reported.
He was expected to be retained. In fact, he was on the list of guys that was supposed to be retained, and then he just took a job with somebody else. So I forget who it was. Oh no, it was Flores. He went to go work with Flores. So he's in Minnesota now. Yeah, he's got experience with them. So I get it. They had a good year together that year. last topic before we get into all these new assistant coaches for Pittsburgh, LC Greenwood was a finalist for the Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, did not make it into the Hall of Fame. The one senior committee member was Roger Craig, who I feel is very deserving, so I don't feel like that was something where LC Greenwood was slighted by any means. But with all the controversy around the Hall of Fame voting this year, you can't be super surprised. The guy's been waiting for 40 years to get into the Hall of Fame. So, what's another year or two?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but another year of kind of waiting for some of our guys to fall into place. Obviously, we've already talked about Himes year after year after year after year that James and I have done this podcast. And I feel like, unfortunately, we only got one of those guys out of the way in Larry Fitzgerald this year.
And he wasn't on the list last year. He was the first.
No, he wasn't. So.
He prevented the long gym, but he didn't create any new space,
Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see. There's got to be a year where two of these guys got to get in, and then I think maybe he'll have a chance. But maybe, who knows, James? Maybe we'll get another year like when you went. There was 3 or 4 guys. Granted, it was 2 years, but.
Yeah, it was a 2-year class, and then it was also like a 50-year anniversary class or something too. So that's how Donnie Shell got in that year. But that was Troy Polamalu and Bill Cower and Donnie Shell, and I think Fanico went in that class as well. So one heck of a class, man. That was a fantastic weekend.
Let's bounce over and talk coaches, right?
That's it, man. We got a ton of new coaches. We're going to start with probably the most important one of all of them, the assistant special teams coach. I'm kidding. Offensive coordinator. We got a new man in town calling the plays. Well, he's not going to be calling the plays, but he'll be coming up with the game plan with our head coach, Brian Angelicio. I'm not sure which pronunciation is right. I've heard it both ways. He's got quite the resume, and our own Nicholas Pretzel has done a lot of homework to get us some good info on what this guy's been doing for the last 20 years.
Yeah, you figure the offensive coordinator is going to be a big piece. We know McCarthy's going to be calling the plays. He said so in his conference. But the offense still runs through the offensive coordinator. Calling the plays is part of that, but as James mentioned, the game plan is another huge part of it. And Angelicio or Ikio, we'll find out when he starts talking to the media, but has a pretty solid resume. Started out with Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and a lot of his earlier career stints as a coach, he had like a 2-year stint with a lot of these teams. He was with Tampa Bay for a couple of years, Cleveland, Washington for 1, Panthers for 2, and it wasn't Packers for 3 or 4. And then it wasn't really until he got to the Vikings where he had that longer stint of the 4 years. So starting off in Tampa Bay, in his second year there, he had tight end Tim Wright, who had a career year, 571 yards, 10.6 average, and 5 touchdowns. And that was more than double his second best career year.
And so for transparency, as Nick goes through this, he was the tight ends coach for most of these teams. Not until Minnesota did he have a larger role than a tight ends coach.
Yeah,
correct. So moving on to Cleveland, Gary Barnidge was the tight end to highlight in his career there. Had a 1,000-yard season, 1,043 yards to be exact, 13.2 average, 9 touchdowns. His next best season, which was a year removed from having Angelicio as his coach, was 612 yards, 11.1 yards per reception, and 2 touchdowns. So he almost doubled his production as well. Then moving on to Washington, he only had 1 year, and there was poor QB play from 3 different quarterbacks. I think it was Kirk Cousins, Dwayne Haskins, and then another quarterback on the roster. And the top tight end in that year was Jeremy Sprinkle. So you don't figure that you're going to be having a whole lot of success when your top tight end is Jeremy Sprinkle. So that was a little bit of an off year, and he kind of fell off the radar of a lot of people for a bit during that year. However, then in Carolina, the tight ends weren't really utilized a whole lot. They also had to compete with Chuba Hubbard, CMC, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson for targets, and you don't usually think of Robbie Chosen Anderson as a premier receiver, but in the years that Angelicio was with Carolina, both Moore and Anderson had 1,000-yard seasons. So when you have two wide receivers going for 1,000 yards and you have tight ends that you aren't really as familiar with, that aren't really big names, you're not going to see a whole lot of production out of a tight end room when you have CMC who can function as a receiving back. You've got 2,000-yard receivers. You've got Chuba Hubbard who also can function as a receiving back. So you're not really seeing as much there. I skipped over the Green Bay years because I accidentally didn't realize he was a coach there until after I had looked at Carolina. But while he was with Green Bay, the first year he had 3 tight ends on the roster who had to compete with Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, and Randall Cobb for targets, but still managed to get out of all his tight ends 683 yards, 10.1 average per reception, and 3 touchdowns. Second year, 4 tight ends on the roster, 627 yards, 12.4 yards average, 2 touchdowns. Same receivers on the roster. Then in his third year, still 4 tight ends rostered with 922 yards, 13.2 average, 4 touchdowns. That was the Adams, Marquez Valdez, Scandling, Randall Cobb year, and that was when MBS was not the MBS we saw this past year with the Steelers. So he was actually a lot more productive then. And so to be able to have 4 tight ends producing solid average on each play, he's getting good production out of them, even if the touchdowns aren't there. They're getting good yardage. They're getting good averages on the attempts. And then in his final year with Green Bay, 693 yards, 10.7 average, and 4 touchdowns. So he manages to elevate these tight ends, which if you're a Freiermuth guy, if you're a Darnell Washington guy, you should be getting really excited about Angelicio as a tight ends coach, because he's able to take his tight ends and elevate them to a higher level of play than they were ever playing before. Got career years out of a lot of guys that were not really a big name before, and is able to get tight ends to 1,000 yards receiving and leading the team in receiving that year. I mean, granted it was Browns, but hey, we'll look past that for now and move on to the Vikings resume, where he was also the pass game coordinator. So you do need to sort of factor in a little bit of the wide receivers, more of the quarterback play to see who the quarterback was that was actually getting the ball to these receivers, and get a little bit of a look at that. So in Minnesota, starting in 2022, he had Kirk Cousins at quarterback. The offense got a total of 4,484 passing yards, 7.2 yards per attempt, 30 passing touchdowns, 263 yards a game, 15 interceptions, and 47 sacks for 334 yards total. In that season, not Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, had 1,800 yards, 14.1 average, 8 touchdowns, and TJ Hawkinson, who was only with the team for 10 games after being traded from Detroit and had to learn a whole new system, had 519 yards, 8.6 average, and 3 touchdowns. That was the year before they ended up getting Jordan Addison, so there was a bit more of the production for Justin Jefferson. 2023, he had half a season with Kirk Cousins, and the other half was between Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs. Still managed to get 4,359 yards, 7.4 for attempt. Another season with 30 passing touchdowns, 256.4 yards a game, 19 interceptions, and 47 sacks for 341 yards. This is where you get to see a bit more of TJ Hawkinson, a lot more of Jordan Addison, and a little less of I'm going to say Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. So 1,074 yards out of Jefferson, 15.8 average, 5 touchdowns, 960 yards for Hawkinson, 10.1 average, 5 touchdowns, his best year as a tight end. Jordan Addison, 911 yards, 13.0 average, 10 touchdowns, career year for him there as well. 2024, he was working with, Sam Darnold. 4,043 yards, 8.0 per attempt, 35 passing touchdowns, 237 yards a game, 12 interceptions, 49 sacks for 366 yards. Justin Jefferson with 1,533 yards, 14 yards per attempt, 10 touchdowns. Hawkinson was injured for a little over half the season, but still managed to get 445 yards, 11.1 average, no touchdowns that year. And then Jordan Addison, 875 yards, 19.5 average, 9 touchdowns. And then the final season was the J.J. McCarthy season. And so we all know how that went, so we can give him a little bit of grace here. 2,834 yards, 6.6 per attempt, 18 touchdowns, 166.7 yards a game, 21 interceptions, 60 sacks for 374 yards. Justin Jefferson still had a 1,000-yard season, being who he is. Only 2 touchdowns on a 12.5 average. Hawkinson, 438 yards a game, 8 yards a season. Sorry, 8.6 average per reception. 610 yards for Jordan Addison, 13.7 average, and 3 touchdowns. And ironically, the J.J. McCarthy year was the best the O-line was functioning that year. They were ranked 7th according to PFF this year, 13th in 2024 with Sam Darnold, 23rd in the carousel year with Mullins, Dobbins, and Cousins, and in the Cousins-only year, 22nd. So they haven't had the best offensive line play in any of these years. And even as this passing game coordinator, you've seen Angelicio be able to get these receivers and tight ends to their career years. He's able to elevate the play of a lot of these guys. And it seems to be that, we know Kevin O'Connell's calling the plays there, but he was in charge of that passing game. So you have to figure that the guy scheming these guys open, creating the game plan, identifying the weaknesses in defenses and the strengths in his own offense is going to be able to do probably just the same thing in Pittsburgh. You figure when McCarthy's going to be calling the plays, he's going to be orchestrating the game plan. I'm really excited to see what he's able to scheme up for a very young and talented roster with an O-line that mirrors the same.
Yeah, that was a lot of information, and it seems like everywhere he goes, he gets to pull the best out of certain people. Whether that's him being similar to Mike Tomlin and being a player's coach, or whether he just is very good at scheming things with offensive coordinators and stuff like that. And I think that the more that we pay attention to this hire and how this process goes, we may kind of get a feeling for that. But I think it's even cool to process even before he made it to the NFL. He was also in Pittsburgh before at the college. So that's exciting. So he's familiar with the town. He's familiar with the people. And then obviously the Green Bay connection, which just keeps popping up. But I'm very excited for this guy just because especially when you see that passing game coordinator on a team like the Vikings that had Justin Jefferson and all these talented guys. So I'm very, very excited to see what this guy brings to the table, even though, again, he's not calling plays.
Yeah, I got to be optimistic about this as well, too. I like the extreme experience with tight end. One of the big things that we all talked about all season long, not enough involvement with Pat Freiermuth in the season. We all feel pretty strongly that the direction needs to go more towards Pat Freiermuth, away from Jonnu Smith, including getting him off of the roster, even more so towards Darnell Washington. I'm okay with it being more of a split between the two of them because that's where the talent's at on the team. This guy not only identified wanting TJ Hawkinson, he really got the most out of him when healthy, which TJ's had issues with being healthy. That's not a coach's fault when that happens. But the other thing that has me optimistic is this man figured out a way to get the most out of Sam Darnold. Let's be realistic. That is very much so his responsibility as a passing game coordinator to make sure his quarterback is on the same page as his targets. Sam played his best year as a professional with the Vikings. So much so that he got himself paid leaving, and the decision to move on from him cost the Minnesota Vikings general manager their job. That guy just got fired after the season was over because of how poorly they mismanaged the quarterback situation as far as personnel. And not keeping Darnold and hanging on to J.J. McCarthy, who's looked pretty bad so far in his professional career. Not saying he can't turn it around. He might be able to still. But that was what was holding things back last year was the quarterback play by J.J. McCarthy. So a lot of him getting the best out of people is stuff that I really like to see, and especially with this tight end experience. We needed somebody on the roster after losing our tight ends coach We needed somebody who could really help this tight end room flourish and get the most out of them. And I like the possibility of that happening with this guy at the helm here.
And I want to highlight too, James, how you mentioned him getting a lot out of Darnold. And I feel like a lot of people, because my initial reaction was, oh, well, Darnold's doing well with Seattle as well. So is that really an Angelicio thing? Jake Peets, I believe is how you pronounce it, is the passing game coordinator in Seattle. And he had Geno Smith looking good for a little while there in Seattle as well. And we see
Yeah.
how that's working out for the Raiders. So he went from one good offensive pass game coordinator to another good offensive pass game coordinator, which is where that success can continue in there. So
Yep.
it's not a knock on Sam. He does well with good coaching, and he's gone from good coaching to good coaching.
Yeah.
No doubt. Now we hope some of these other guys are just as good at coaches. Going on to the special teams room, old Danny is out, new Danny is in. We've got Danny Crossman as the special teams coach now for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he's been in the league for 22 years as a special teams coach. So quite the resume from Danny Crossman. Anything jump out on him with you guys?
I think the thing that jumps out, not necessarily from a coaching standpoint that will pertain to us, but his first coaching stint was with the London Monarchs back in the 90s, early 90s. So he's been coaching since then, obviously. And then that London connection, if we have a London game for whatever reason this year, he's got the works, he's got the connections to make sure our hotel's nice, make sure we get taken care of. But no, I mean, I think the big things that stand out to me is how he's had stints at teams for long times. Obviously, he was with the Panthers in different coaching titles from '03 to '09, and then he was with the Lions for 2 years before going to the Bills for 5 years, and then spent some time in Miami, and now he's with us. And if you recall, Miami, whenever they brought in Mike McDaniel, kind of had some explosiveness in there. Not when they brought in Mike McDaniel, but one of the things Mike McDaniel wanted to focus on was special teams, and they had some explosiveness on special teams, and that's what Pittsburgh needs. So I'm hoping he can bring some explosiveness and some creativity to the new kickoff return rules and stuff like that. But very, very excited to see what this guy can bring to the table.
And similar to what you said about Angelicio, Cody, Crossman played football at the University of Pittsburgh back in the day. Was an All-American, All-Big East defensive back, and also started at fullback in the 80s. So, Crossman understands Pittsburgh as well in that sort. McCarthy's building like the Infinity Gauntlet of Pittsburgh guys for his team here. He's bringing these guys in who understand the culture, who understand the city, and who also have solid resumes on their coaching careers. So I'm really excited about both these coordinator hires, just almost as much as I was excited about Patrick Graham, who I thought was an under the radar kind of guy as well. So liking the team that we're building so far, hoping that they live up to the excitement that I'm starting to feel.
Yeah, I think there's a reason for it because these guys have some pretty serious resumes. Either the coaching experience is pretty serious or the playing experience, and in some situations, it's both. So pretty cool to see to me. Our next guy on the list here is the assistant head coach / secondary coach, Joe Witt Jr. Joe's been a coach in the league for a very long time now, going all the way back to 2007 with the Atlanta Falcons. A large portion of his experience has been as a secondary coach or passing game coordinator for the defense. And that is exactly what he's going to be doing for Pittsburgh here as a secondary coach and an assistant head coach. So extremely experienced individual. And man, once again, we get to add somebody to the room who's seen a lot from a lot of different places, is coached with Mike McCarthy in Dallas and then again in Green Bay. So the connections once again are there. But quite the resume here from Joe Witt Jr.
I think the big thing for me with Joe Witt is the consistency that he got out of certain players. I mean, when he took over or when he came in at Atlanta, I'm trying to double check to see what that roster was like that year, but I'm pretty sure they had a young up and coming corner or safety that he was able to work with just even for that year. And then after that year, I thought that player stopped being relevant, but I'm trying to do my research on that. So you guys can go ahead and talk about him if you want.
Yeah, I wasn't overly familiar with Witt, so this was one of the ones that, and he's not obviously one of the big ticket names in the staff. He's still important, obviously. All your coaches matter. They're going to be working with your guys day in and day out, especially if they're a position coach and you want to see them elevate that room so that they're playing at a better level. Um, but he wasn't like the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator. So this one flew a little bit under my radar. So I didn't have as much knowledge on him. I don't know if either of you had more extensive knowledge of his history.
To me, more of it with him is just that he's an extremely experienced guy. So I like the fact that he's been around the league as long as he has, and the fact that McCarthy put him in an assistant head coach position is usually someone that um, you like their experience and you appreciate their advice. So this is someone where you're expecting to get really good advice and really good input in a game plan. So that's the thing to me is when you're good doing something like that with someone's role. Sure, he's the secondary coach, but he's going to be kind of advising Mike on here's some stuff that we probably need to be implementing for this week. Cody, do you have any luck finding out who that Falcons player was you were thinking of?
Yeah, not necessarily young and up and coming, but the name was Chris Crocker. You might recognize him because he also played for Cincinnati for a time. In his 1 year with Witt as the coach, was the only year he had double digit pass defenses, as well as his first year of 3 interceptions, and then he went on later with Cincinnati to have another 3 interception year as well. But I thought that this spur of growth in his, I mean, at that point he was already in the league for 4 years. He started in Cleveland. As soon as that year ended, Atlanta decided to move on from him, and he kind of had an up and down career since then. But that was a guy that I think, if I remember correctly, doing my research whenever saw Joe Witt's name pop up the other day while I was sitting at work, this was a guy that accredited him for some of his success. I would love to find that article again, but I don't know where that was.
Yeah. So let's roll on to our new defensive line coach. Then this should be a familiar name for anybody who's been a Steelers fan for a significant amount of time. Domata Peko, former Cincinnati Bengals defensive lineman, played in the NFL for 15 years, was a run-stopping menace, and just one of those huge Polynesian, whether he's Hawaiian or which island he's from, I'm not sure. But just an absolute mauler and a tank of an individual who has even had some experience as a goal line fullback. I've seen some videos of him running over Troy Polamalu in the A-gap, which is not a fair matchup at all for poor Troy. But you love this kind of experience and the fact that he was an absolute menace against the run. That's what Pittsburgh desires to be. Is a team that absolutely shuts down your run game on first and second down and then sets you up in a position where it's third and long and you have to pass and we can just unleash our pass rushers because we've got a plethora of them. So love the experience. He's only 42 years old, so his coaching resume is not going to be as extensive as some other people, but his playing resume is probably a longer one than most.
Yep. Nick?
Yeah, I like that longevity of his playing career. I like the era that he played in too, because I mean, a lot of us have seen and appreciated the comments that Joe Flacco made recently about how the NFL has become a bit softer, about how people aren't really like, I believe his exact words are, we signed up to get concussions, to get hit, something along those lines. So that sort of toughness, I feel like, has sort of come away from the NFL, especially with a lot of the more roughing the passer rules. Like you can't fall on the quarterback, and there's just a lot of things that I feel like have become very soft about the NFL. And so I want a guy in that linebacker room or whatever room he's going to be in. I can't recall exactly, but just I want that kind of mindset of the heavy hitting, hard hitting defensive guy. And Cody referenced Ben earlier when we were discussing this hire, saying, this was a guy, whenever you played the Bengals, you didn't want to play the Bengals because you were wondering when the next dirty hit was coming. And you didn't worry about that with him. And he has this sort of code of, I'm going to hit you clean, but I'm going to hit you hard. And that's what I want on my defense. So that's a wonderful thing, I think, to have in the room, and a coach that I'm excited to see coach these guys up and hopefully to play that sort of AFC North football that's hard hitting, but also how to keep it clean and how to respect the other player and hit them good, but hit them clean.
Yeah, he has a very similar size to Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon. I think he was 6'3". They're both 6'4", around the same weight. And so I'm excited to see what he can do. The big thing with Pecco was his ability to get leverage, even going up against some bigger offensive linemen. And I'm excited to see what he can bring to the team as far as technique, as far as what he can show these younger guys that maybe they haven't seen before, maybe a different style or a different move, to pivot their body or whatever that could be. I don't want to speculate too much. But I'm excited because he had so much success in his career. And I think I had the stats here for a second. I don't know where they went. But he had a not a dominating career, but he was always consistent in his ability to get after the quarterback, stop the run, just do a lot of things. On his career, stat-wise, he left his career with a total of only 20 sacks, which wasn't a lot, but he was always his big year was when he was 31 years old. He got 5, and that was his biggest year. But the big thing here, 50 QB hits in his total career, 47 tackles for loss. And then he also had, where's that stat? 14 pass breakups, which is what we love to see out of the big guys up front. So he's going to be right there with Cam Hayward, beating all these guys about getting their hands up. So I'm excited for that.
Absolutely. Just a guy that was very difficult to move, and you had to game plan for him every Sunday. You don't make it in the league for 15 years without having a lot of respect around the NFL for being able to do what you do at a high level. So that's a pretty respectable thing from Domata Pecco. Defensive quality control coach, we've got a new one there, Pat Riley, not the Pat Riley from the Los Angeles Lakers. This is a different Pat Riley. And quality control coach, you would think he's going to be doing a lot of film study, self-analysis, try and figure out any weaknesses to our team and maybe things that can be exploited on other teams. What do you got on his history there, Cody?
This was the one guy I couldn't find a whole lot on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm still trying to actually pull his stuff up. Every time I look up Pat Riley,
he is
it pulls up other stuff.
was formerly with the Houston Texans this past year, whose defensive unit was very elite. Obviously, they had a lot of quality pieces on that roster, but you still have to be able to scheme those guys around, and that's, as James highlighted, what a defensive quality control coach does. He also had spent some time with the Jacksonville Jaguars as an assistant linebackers coach and defensive quality control coach there as well. So really solid guy. Or not necessarily solid guy. He doesn't have a whole ton of experience, but he has been on teams that have had solid defensive units, seen what those teams have been able to do, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that experience to the Steelers.
Absolutely. And it's just neat to see that a lot of positions on this whole coaching staff didn't exist before. I don't remember there being a quality control coach on one side or another, passing game coordinator coaches on the offense or the defense. And the next guy here, an assistant special teams coach, Danny Smith, had to do it all by himself. We now have Darius Swinton II, who will be helping with the special teams, which I think is very important. That way you can have guys working on multiple things at the same time. There might be 2 guys that need coached up at the same time. If you only got one coach, you can't do it. So I like the fact that there will be a man waiting in the wings here to help Danny Crossman out in a whole new staff there in the special teams.
Yeah, and he's been special teams his entire career. He started with the Rams in 2009 as special teams quality control coach, went to Kansas City in 2012, Broncos 13 through 14, Bears for 15, Niners for 16, back to Bears for 17, Detroit Lions for 18, spent a lot of time in that NFC North, which might ring a bell. Arizona Cardinals in 19 and 20, then the Chargers in 21, Raiders 23 through 25, and then obviously with us now, but a lot of special teams interaction. The only question I have here is why he's bounced around so much. I know that's somewhat normal, but you typically see an increase in like job status when that happens, and it's just been a lot of assistant special teams coach, assistant special teams coach, assistant special teams coach. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with him moving forward. But excited that there's help in the room for sure.
Yeah, definitely a valuable thing. Anything that you guys want to mention any more about these guys before we kick to our Senior Bowl recap?
His short stint with the Lions was as an offensive assistant, so hopefully we will see that expertise or not expertise necessarily, it was a short stint, but that experience from there hopefully go towards the return game, because we wanted, as we said, a bigger splash in the return game on special teams. So hopefully whatever experience he got with the Lions helps him to help us get that splash. That's really the only thing I had for Swinton.
Yep.
No, yeah, I know we talked about it on a previous show. Cody looked it up for us, that show, and our return men ranked like 57th and 58th in the league or something awful.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're bad return men. You know, they're averaging 24, 25 yards a return. But in the NFL, that's not a really good number. That's a very pedestrian number. So we're hoping to see more explosiveness from the return game all around, punt and kick, in future seasons. Speaking of explosiveness, the Senior Bowl is a very exciting game every year. This is your higher end talent when you start talking about prospects for the upcoming class. I don't know, did either one of you get a chance to catch any of the game? Have any players you want to highlight from it?
I couldn't find a way to watch it.
I unfortunately did not, but if I had, I probably would have watched it at the Edinburgh Hotel Bar, where I did not watch the Senior Bowl, but yesterday I did get a big bowl of chips, homemade chips and salsa, and it was fantastic.
Support for Steelers by the Lake is provided by the Edinburgh Hotel Bar, serving a variety of lunch and dinner specials every day, including steak, seafood, Italian pasta dishes, and more. They're located at 100 Meadville Street in downtown Edinburgh. Information is available at 814-734-5103 or online at edinburghhotelbar.com.
I do miss the Edinburgh Hotel Bar. That is the one thing that I will say I miss from not being in Pennsylvania anymore. And you guys, let's clarify. But food has a special spot in my heart. But James, as far as the Senior Bowl goes, the big name that I saw pop up after the fact was that LSU quarterback. I don't even remember his name. I saw a bunch of people talking about. Yes, that was the name. That was a lot of things I saw while I was trying to look it up. Was that his stock went up noticeably from that game? That was really the only thing that I saw, unfortunately.
Yeah, Nussmeier's on my list. He's the third guy I've got on here. I felt like he was the best quarterback in the game. If you've been following the draft process the last couple of years, Nussmeier was one of the big names coming into this season. A lot of people expected him to be a top 5 quarterback, maybe even a first-round candidate. And then his regular season play, it kind of fell off a little bit. But in this game, all accounts are that he had an excellent week of practice, and he went out there in the game and took them right down the field on the first 2 drives, and they finished with touchdowns on those drives. He did throw an interception, but it was an awful play by the tight ends, who, unfortunately, the tight end group just had a really bad day in this game. I don't know how they practiced. I didn't get the opportunity to watch all the practices, but they're just dropping balls left and right in this game, which makes you a little more relieved that Pittsburgh's going with a Mike McCarthy West Coast offense, which is more likely to have 3 wide receivers than it is 3 tight ends. But overall, I thought Nussmeier was very accurate. He was on time with his throws, and he looked very confident and poised. Now, he's not the biggest dude in the world. He's 6'1", 202, so it's kind of a small quarterback. But you do feel like after what you saw in this game, you could get valuable backup snaps for him, and maybe even has the potential as a long-term future starter for someone. I wouldn't throw him out there day one. I'd allow him to kind of sit back and learn from a veteran. Running back, Jamari Taylor was the first guy who splashed in this game. He's 5'9", 205, ran really hard, didn't have the breakaway speed, but he was super quick. So one of those dudes that's going to hit the hole, just separating from those defensive backs to turn it into a home run might not be his specialty, but you're not going to have any issues with him finding a hole or hitting it and getting through to the other side. Next guy that really impressed me, who I was unfamiliar with going into this game and am very familiar with now, a right tackle by the name of Max Ihanachor. Max has only been playing football for a couple of years. He did not go into college intending to play football, but that's where life took him. He is 6'5" and 5'8", 325 pounds, and he's a lean 325. He's well built. He's one of those dudes that has big calves, like skinny knees, like everything looks like a big power lifter kind of dude, and he moves really, really well. Very fluid mover. He was just shutting people down. When he'd use a two-hand swipe and get the guy into the ground, he'd jump on him and belly flop on him. He's got the killer instincts of what you're looking for. He's a raw dude, and he's only played right tackle at this stage. So is that a fit for Pittsburgh? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Fatanu played a lot of left tackle in college, so could you move Fatanu back to the left? Maybe. I don't know. Could Maxi Ihanachor play on the left? Maybe. He hasn't done it before. But that kind of length and athleticism is just incredible. And I don't have arm lengths on almost all these guys because the Senior Bowl made it dang near impossible. So this guy did not look like length was an issue, though. I would say he has plenty there. Moving on to the defensive line, I had LT Overton, 6'2" and 6'8", 278 pounds. He got a sack with a long arm move, which we see Cam Hayward do that a lot of times. Instead of going into the chest with two arms, you kind of change your shoulders and go one arm into the chest, which gives you the ability to outreach the other individual. He walked them back with that one arm like that. So kind of neat to see him exploit that. I would guess this is probably a guy that doesn't have the length that you'd be looking for based off of his size. He'd be a 4-3 defensive end. Don't know that he fits Pittsburgh's system all that well, but I'm excited to see what he gets measurement-wise when he goes to the combine, see how he runs, see how his length is, some of that stuff that tells you a little bit more next level on how people can translate. A middle linebacker that popped all throughout this game was Bryce Betcher. Bryce is just a normal-sized dude, 6 foot and 7/8, so he's basically 6'1", 227 pounds, but he was flying all over the place. Very physical, hitting people hard, very fluid mover in coverage, too. I felt like he was a well-rounded dude. So, again, somebody I'm going to be anxious to see what kind of results he gets in the combine. Does he weigh in at 227? Does he weigh in a little bit heavier? That's a little bit light for me. You know, I don't necessarily like middle linebackers quite that light because our middle linebackers do have to take on guards and centers sometimes. So that can be kind of tough. So that arm length and that weight can factor into it. But the dude put great tape out there in this game. An outside linebacker by the name of Vincent Anthony, 6'5" and 3/8", 246 pounds, had a nice dip and rip move that's lowering the shoulder and then swimming through basically with the opposite arm, and then got in there for the strip sack. So he knew he was going to get the sack. He came down with the hammer on the ball. He knocked it loose. So you like to see that kind of mature pass rush move. This is something that you see guys do drills on every single day. He executed it perfectly in the game, went and got a sack. Right tackle my first guy's a right tackle, Jude Bowery, 6'4" and 7/8", 314 pounds. He had an awful game. And I don't say this too much on takeaways, but I literally wrote him down and said next to can't pass block at all. There were a few guys who really struggled in this game with pass blocking. Jude was one of them, unfortunately. So I think maybe he has to kick inside to guard, or maybe he needs to sit for a few years and have somebody help him with technique. But he was just getting beat like a drum this whole game. So not a good day for him. Opposite of that, the next guy I was very impressed with. He had a great week of practice, played right tackle in college, played some right guard as well. Jennings Dunker. Jennings Dunker is that dude where every year we come out of the Senior Bowl and there's like one guy who looks like a creative player redneck, and he just goes out there and kicks everybody's butt that he goes against. This dude's almost 6'5". He's 6'4" and 7/8, 320 pounds, and he's just thick all around. Thick arms, thick legs, thick in the trunk. Like everything about this dude is thick, but he moves really well. As a tackle, he handled the pass rush just fine. When he moved inside the guard, he put people on their butts. I think he'd be a killer guard at the pro level, and somebody maybe we could look at as a second or third round prospect. I don't know if it'd still be there in the third round, but maybe if you don't get your guard in the first round, you might be able to take a guy like Jennings Dunker, slap him in there at left guard, and have a real butt kicker over there. My final note on him, he's a mauler with a mullet. And you gotta love a good mauler with a mullet on your offensive line. Running back Seth McGowan was another one who just stuck out big time for me. 5'11" and 5'8", 215 pounds, so a good-sized kid. Really, really fast. Got the opportunity to show off his hands in the pass-catching game and did a nice job catching the ball as well. So good all-around back. Again, the only reason I see Pittsburgh going for a running back is if they're unable to retain Kenny Gainwell in free agency. You kind of never know when a whole new coaching staff comes in if they're going to value a player the same way the previous coaching staff did. So there's a chance that Pittsburgh looks at it and says, we're just not going to pay this guy what he's worth in free agency. If that happens, we've got a few running backs that I thought that looks pretty nice. If you watched any Indiana football this last year, and I imagine a lot of folks did since they went out there and won the national championship, you're probably familiar with their starting running back, Kalen Black. Kalen looked just as good in this game as he did all season for Indiana. This is a stout dude, man. This is reminds me of Jalen Warren kind of running back from this game. 5'9" and 6'8", 208 pounds. Boy, does that sound familiar. I think Warren's like 5'10", 215. Very, very, very quick dude. Runs with a lot of power. He runs a lot bigger than he is. When he is at collision with a linebacker or a defensive lineman, he's always fighting for extra yards. He doesn't necessarily try to hit him center mass. He's good at hitting a half of a guy and getting through him for more yards. Just one of those muscle hamster type dudes who fights for every single yard and is real quick in doing it. So I really like Kalen Black. I'd love to see Kalen Black in the black and gold. Next guy for me, an offensive guard by Delby Lemieux. Delby's 6'5", 305, so not a big mauling type, but a technique guy. I liked his ability to mirror and match the defensive lineman. He didn't get bull rushed. He wasn't mauling people in the run game, but he seemed like he was always winning his matchup. So if you're in a zone blocking scheme kind of thing where your guy needs to be able to move and pull a lot, Lemieux might be a real nice piece for teams that do a lot of that pulling guard type action. Final guy for me was dominant in this game, and he was difficult to get measurements on because, again, the Senior Bowl just did a bad job with that, which is kind of their thing. But once I did, it kind of explained what I saw on tape. Caleb Banks, a defensive lineman from Georgia, one of the highest touted guys in this game, 6'6", 335, 35-inch long arms. Again, he looked lean. He didn't look chubby at 335. I am stunned that he had a weight of 335. I thought he was going to be like 315 or something. Really, really active hands. Uses his length to defeat people very quickly. Quick feet. Good pass rusher. Stout against the run. I saw once or twice where his height was kind of used against him and people got under his pads, which can happen, of course, with a guy that's 6'6". But I thought more often than not, he was winning his matchups and even defeating a second blocker a lot of times. Very disruptive against the run, very disruptive against the pass, getting after the quarterback. And if your plan falls to crap in the first round and you can't get the guard or the wide receiver that you want, you could walk away with a guy like this who would be one heck of a bookend to Derek Harmon at the first round, and I would still be ecstatic with a guy like him.
Well, and with that guy, there's this potential of, what happens when Cam's gone. So that has a very, very quick futuristic impact. That I kind of didn't feel as much. So like that guy, I'm actually excited to look into when the draft comes around. I feel like he has a more potential impact than some of the other guys you've talked about so far.
And you know how I feel about draft prospects. This is my favorite time of the year. I love looking into them and mocking and all that kind of stuff. And Dunker's one that's been on my radar for a little while to go back and highlight one. Has experience at both guard positions and 2 years at right tackle. So that gives him a whole lot of experience across the line. We talk a lot on the show, and obviously we're going to be seeing some new trends in what Pittsburgh's going to draft because we have new coaching staff and they're going to like different things. But this is that Swiss Army knife kind of guy that we talk about a lot, where he can play different positions along the line. If a guy goes down and he's not the starter, he can flex over to like that sort of situation. So even if you can, if you're wanting to reinvest heavily in the O-line this year, which I don't think they will do heavily, but with Sayamalu getting up there and his play sort of starting to decline, and who knows if he comes back, it's one of those things of we need to start thinking about that earlier rather than later, because if you're going to throw a guy into the fire, we've shown that hasn't worked as well. So we talk a lot about drafting ahead, letting them sit behind a guy for a little bit, and then take over as that starting role. Dunker is, as James mentioned, the mauler with a mullet. So he reminds me a lot of Cody Monch from a couple years ago, but in my opinion, a higher profile prospect.
And a thicker dude too. Cody Mock wasn't as thick as this guy is. He looks like he's already a fourth or fifth year pro to me, and he's still getting out of college. He is not scared of the weight room. This is one of those dudes that I will not be surprised if he puts up 30 plus reps on the bench. He just looks like a guy who fell in love with the weight room at like 9 years old and never left it.
There's an insider from the Chargers that posted a little blurb about him, and he was this was earlier on in the season, and he was convinced that they had been sandbagging his size because he was the same size as the left guard. So I think, who knows, maybe they were doing a little bit of tweaking numbers here and there, but no, he's a big guy, and he's like James said, just a mauler of a man.
Awesome. So we're going to have very soon here our mock drafts. Mock draft season is upon us. A lot of people are already doing some. We're in February, and the draft is 2.5 months away. So we're going to start doing those real soon for you guys. If you have any requests on anything you want us to cover, this is kind of that time of year where we get into that sort of thing to be able to do. Is there anything either one of you guys want to touch base on real quick before we wrap up today's show?
If you guys have a prospect you want us to take a look at, drop them in the comments. We would love to be looking at a guy that you fell in love with from, maybe it's your college team, or maybe you just were at a bar one day watching a game and you're like, man, I want that guy for the Steelers. Let us know. We'll be happy to take a look and do a little bit of a coverage on that prospect.
Yeah. James will definitely tell you if he's a scheme fit for us and if it's someone that Pittsburgh would want to draft or not. And then we'll give you the honest opinion, even if not. If it's someone that we don't think would fit Pittsburgh's scheme, hey, this guy would do really well in a 4-3 or a different type of offense, whatever it is. But we'd love to do that. So I love that, Nick. Definitely be letting us know what you guys are looking forward to in this offseason, who you want to keep in free agency. We have to have that conversation once free agency starts coming around. We've already talked about who we would keep and who we would get rid of. But then we got to share our opinions on what Pittsburgh winds up actually doing and how that might affect the draft as well. So be on the lookout for new things. Nick, send us home.
We cannot thank you enough for listening to us here at Steelers by the Lake. If you would, please give us a follow on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify. Subscribe, ring a bell. Ring the bell. It doesn't cost you a thing. Don't forget the 5-star reviews, especially on Apple Podcasts. Make James and the rest of us very happy. And until next time, these are your hosts, James, Cody, and Nick, signing off.
Peace.